I usually start out my speeches with a saying. Nothing that I made up, but I just feel that it fits very well into what I'm about to say. It's very simple. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Now, you got to remember that when I said that it started with a feeling, right? I can tell you, when we started and we made our mission to go out and create communities where youth could be heard, they could be loved, and they could be inspired to live in hope. That sounds corny, and imagine how corny that is when I stand up in front of thousands of adolescents and I try to explain that message. But is it that corny? Because I know for my own self, 7 years ago, it's what saved my life. Love, hope, and being heard. But I could stand up here, I could roll up my sleeves, I could show you the track marks on my arm, right? I could tell you that 7 years ago I walked into a pharmacy and I robbed it, and then 5 days later I went out and robbed another one. I could tell you that 17 years ago my own father died with a rope around his neck and a needle in his arm. I could show you what 8 years of piss and hell looks like to be an intravenous heroin addict. I could explain to you the fear of God that I put into some poor woman when I went into Walgreens pharmacy and demanded OxyContin. I can talk about those things. We can explain there, or we can go back and we can start talking about some of the earlyhood trauma that took effect. Because regardless of what happened, it didn't matter how we got there. The matter was that we were there. So when I have people come up to me and they say, Doug, what would have been the difference in your life? What would have made the difference then? Well, it wasn't when I was putting a needle on my arm and my mom was crying to me, asking me to get help. It wasn't when I saw myself on the news and I knew that prison was a matter of if, just when. It was the day on September 10th of 2010 when I sat alone in a Brown County jail cell, in the shower to be exact, and I had my own orange jail pants wrapped around my own throat, and I was attempting to take my life that day. But we talk about those three really corny things, right? Hope, love, being heard. Well, when I was dying, when I was swinging from my rope, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. There sure as hell was no hope. To me, though, I got a moment of clarity, and this is how it came. You see, I have a younger brother. My younger brother's name is Andrew. My brother is 10 years younger than me. As I sat there dying in that shower that day, my baby brother was in the midst of his very first freshman week of high school. Something that comes very full circle is during the very first freshman week of my high school was the day I found out I lost my father, and was in fact watching him be put into the ground. So we talk about almost a decade to the date later, a decade of silence and secrets, a decade of trauma. Yeah, by this time I was a 7-time convicted felon. I was facing a prison sentence. But what those three kids gave me, that hope, that love, and that ability to be heard, it gave me clarity for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, I was able to stand up and want something different. I tell you, when I was 13 years of age, I never once said when I grow up I want to be some junkie. No, I made a lot of poor decisions, a lot of poor choices in my life. But I never chose that. That's why we talk recovery. I don't stand up here and preach because I'm still a sinner. Because just because I've found sobriety or recovery in my life doesn't mean that everything's perfect, doesn't mean that everything just got better, that there's still pain and scars to heal. But when we take the stage, we don't take it with a just say no message. It's not me standing up here and saying if you've drank a beer, you've smoked a joint in your life, you're going to grow up and be some junkie and you're going to rob pharmacies and you go to prison like me. Today it's about meeting kids where they're at. It's about letting the world know that it's okay to let the pain show. Because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about putting judgments aside. Everyone has judgments, recovery, addiction, everyday life, mental illness. We live in a society that is very shame and guilt-based, especially in some of the worlds that I live in. I ask that we start just putting those aside, and not even putting them aside. Let's just start acknowledging them. Let's just start acknowledging that judgment is out there. It's a very real thing in the world. But when we have pandemic levels of concern around opiate and addiction abuse, when I can tell you things like every day there's 5,200 suicide attempts of children under the age of 18, and no one's talking about it. So Rise Together goes out and we bring that voice back to the voiceless. Because regardless of the stories you heard from me, 5.5 years in prison, lost my dad, sexual assault, all the earlyhood trauma, right? It's a story of redemption. It's a story of hope. It's a story to go out there and put your best foot forward. And what it started with was a feeling. Rise Together has given me things back, and that's what I want to talk about. Rise Together has given me the ability to wear my heart on my sleeve, to create a movement with some of my best friends in the entire world. It's given me that back. A picture-perfect family. My family, in society's world, would call it split, would call it separated, would call it broken. My family today, with the triumphs and tribulations they've gone to, is stronger than ever. And that's what I think is us as a community, as us as an organization, need to go out and need to promote. Because I'll be the first to tell you, Rise Together, or any program for that matter, is not going to fix your community. Relationships fix your community. Going out and being kind to thy neighbor, not just one, but all. We're talking about really corny things, I get it. But is it corny because it's true? I've had the ability to turn cop lights into spotlights. And it all started with a feeling. Now we're here. Feel that.